So, good morning for those who are watching us right now. Good afternoon, good night for those who are watching later on YouTube. This is the third session of the sixth Journeys of Mixed Music of UFRJ. And I want to thank for the presence here and welcome Helen Gallo, Phivos-Angelos Kollias, and Tiago Gati. And we are going to, Januíbe Tejera is also programmed. He had a problem. We don't know exactly what's happening, but he should arrive later. So please be welcome, Phivos, Tiago, Helen. We're going to start with Phivos-Angelos Kollias directly from Athens. Then we're going to have Tiago Gati from São Paulo, directly from São Paulo also. And in the end, we're going to have a roundtable with moderation by Helen Gallo, directly from São Paulo. I am Pedro Bittencourt, professor of UFRJ, UFRG, Rio de Janeiro, and the mixed music, the Journeys of Mixed Music of UFRJ are an extension project of the university linked to the Performance Hoje research group, Performance Today, also attached to the PPGM, Programa de Pós-Graduação em Música, the first postgraduate master and PhD program in music in Brazil. So please be welcome once again. And I remind you that you can make your questions. We are live on YouTube right now. So in the end of the conferences, you can send or during the conferences, you can write on the YouTube chat the questions you want to make for the conferences. Okay? So, good morning, everybody. Thank you very much being here. I want to remind also that in Brazil, we are still close to 400,000 dead people because of COVID-19, a very difficult moment we're going, and we still do our activities online. So thanks being here, and let's go. Phivos.
Can you hear me now?
Yes.
Okay, great. Thank you for coming here. Thank you for inviting me. And I start now with my presentation. It's loading. Okay. So I'm going to talk about interactive music in virtual reality with MaxMSP, and I'm going to focus on two case studies from my own experience. Again, my name is Phivos-Angelos Kollias. I'm an independent composer researcher, and I'm based in Berlin. Right now I'm in Athens. So thank you for coming somewhere between Rio de Janeiro, Athens, Sao Paulo, and Berlin. We will start by talking about what is virtual reality. The tools I use for advanced music interaction in VR and why using those tools. And then I will focus on the two case studies. So technologically speaking, from a technological perspective, we are talking about a computer system with graphics system capable of real-time animation, like a GPU, controlled by a set of gesture controllers and a position tracker. Things like the HTC Vive you can see on the bottom, or the Oculus on the right. And they all have this head-mounted stereoscopic display for 3D visual output. Now, what is important is also to talk about the experiential perspective. which is it's generated by the computer system, which is attached to the perception of the perceiver. That is to say, to exclude reality and hallucinations and dreams, which for some of you can be debatable. And there are these three concepts that they are key concepts with virtual reality: immersion, interactivity, and telepresence. Immersion, interactivity, and telepresence. So about immersion, it's the concept of feeling surrounded by a world. It's connected with the suspension of disbelief, and it's a passive connection. Whereas interactivity, it's the being able to interact with the world or to act and change, influence the surrounding, which is an active connection. Now, immersion and interactivity are connected with telepresence, which is the conjunction of immersion and interactivity, and it's the feeling being present to the mediated environment and not the actual physical environment that you're at the moment that you're experiencing. Why I care about all this? As a composer researcher, I have a PhD in interactive music composition from the University of Paris 8, where my interest is self-organizing music. That is to say, music works capable of self-organizing sonically, able to sense their environment and continuously change their structure. I'm right now a freelance composer in Berlin, where I work interactive music installations, virtual reality, and video games, to show you the context. And so the tools for music and VR that in the projects mainly that I was working on were using mainly Unity 3D, which is it's like one of the leading industry standards, and it's very easy to use, very versatile, and it has an interface like here on the right that you can see. It uses C#, and it's also very much easy to interact directly with the objects that you can then review and change. On the sound perspective, I'm using, of course, Max. A lot of you maybe you know MaxMSP and all the advantages that it has. It's a visual programming language. It's very easy to use also, very flexible. It has a very big community of users that they interact all the time, which is great for problem solving. And it's great for this kind of projects for fast prototyping, because it has this kind of interface that you can see on the right, with small objects that they could be connected with patches and can form. On the bottom you can see an example patch. It has a very intuitive UX, and also it can be connected with a lot of other tools, like now connected with Unity, or for example other people they use Arduino, or any other thing that it's connectable can be connected with Max. So now, connecting Unity and MaxMSP, the value of it's of course the combination of all the benefits stated above. Visual programming language, easy to use, flexible, great for fast prototyping. Intuitive UX includes and connects different tools. And technically speaking, this is a connection through OSC. So each of the two platforms has a part that is dedicated to sending and receiving data through OSC. There is like a patch in MaxMSP, obviously, and there is like an asset, as they call it in Unity, that does this. I'm going to show some parts of, very briefly, I'm going to show some case studies. I was working lately, 2 VR installations. I will start with Symphony of Noise VR, It's a room-scale virtual reality sonic experience for that was developed mainly for HTC Vive. Here you can experience a small teaser, just to get an idea of the visuals and the sound. The team that we were working together was the project was directed and produced by Michaela Natsikova. It was the media production Close & Co., line producer Maria Silik. The VR development was done by Prefrontal Cortex. I did the music concept, the composition, and the MaxMSP development. And Stefan Klose did the additional Unity sound development. The project was premiered in VRAM Virtual Reality Arts Festival as a prototype. We did a lot of beta testing with users before going into the next stage of production, and we did a premiere in Reeperbahn Music Festival. Both they are in Hamburg in different dates. The project was lucky to be selected, nominated by IDFA, and it was the international premiere there. It was also selected by Forbes as one of the top 35 XR installations of 2019, and got the award of excellence in sound design from the Festival of International Virtual and Augmented Reality Stories. Here you can see some concept design, early concept design sketches through the user journey. Some photos from the premiere. And here is the interaction design, a sketch of the interaction design, showing the mapping that was done with the microphone. The idea was to use direct user input, using a microphone with a gamer's device, having a good device attached with the microphone and speakers and headphones. And in the first scene, there is an instrument that is controlled by the voice of, indirectly controlled by the voice of the user. There is like a bass device that all made in the MaxMSP, and by breathing the user inside the microphone is controlling like a wobbling rate, like a wobbling bass, and controls the rate of speed, controls the distortion, and also there are different layers that they are adding up. There was also a secondary idea of with breathing. There is like a heartbeat sound that increases in volume and richness, again of different layers. And we were using also the controllers to trigger. There is like an interactive score, and where are a lot of loops that they are triggered by sounds. And I can show you now a clip. This is actually the interactive score, which is here in a linear form. It shows in each state which of the different processes are active and looping. But the user can, according to which of the objects around she's going to click, it's going to click a different state. So there are active states that are all together stopping or stopping. like I can show you a small clip here. Here's the main Max user interface for those that are interested in the technical part. Actually, the most, I mean, there are a lot of different modules that can be activated or deactivated, and we're using a lot of messages between the two devices, the two platforms. I mean, Unity and MaxMSP, and the main ones, actually, the vital ones that make everything work is this audio and UDP setup, which looks a bit like that on the surface, of course, which is a very because many times we had to change systems. We had to play it in another festival. We would have to set up again in another room with another microphone sometimes, but the room acoustics could be, so we had to test all these things, and sometimes we couldn't be there. And very importantly, this is like a routine of calibration of the OSC between the two devices. Here's a UDP monitor that can show in real time all the messages that they are sending all the different devices. And for the specialization, I was using in real time the SPAT, the IRCAM library for specialization. And what was happening actually is instead of moving the user around, all the sources are there is a relative change in comparison to the user. And all these different sources you see around are some of they are activated and they are spatialized in real time. Another VR project that I was working with MaxMSP is Proper Motion. This was done with a smaller team. It was directed and produced by Mike Robinson and Harmke Hiesen with their production company High Road Stories. Again, I did interactive music composition and MaxMSP development, and it was selected and premiered in BFI London Film Festival. Here's a small teaser, you can get an idea. In proper motion, sound and vision interconnect as a unified whole. Actions are equally apparent visually and sonically, and human gesture becomes a music gesture. But what are we interacting with? What are we hearing? Following the premise that everything becomes something else at some time, and mirroring the same approach with that of the visuals, we have started with musical found objects which are reformed, remapped, recomposed, something completely new, while incorporating seeds of their origins. One small clip here using some mapping with FM synthesis and feedback, very subtle. And another clip here. Up. Sorry about this.
It's not working, Phivos.
Yeah.
Maybe try to go again in the... Go out, go behind and go for... Yes. Phivos.
Yes.
We said 20 minutes for each one, and Helen was saying here on the private chat, last minute.
Okay. So to make my last point here, if we can make a point, how can virtual reality enrich a music experience, considering the three main elements of immersion? Obviously can increase immersion in the music experience. Every interaction can become a musical interaction, and telepresence, there is the sense of really being inside a music world. Thank you for being here and listening.
Thank you, Phivos. Okay. So we have Januíbe came inside our broadcast room. Welcome, Januíbe, directly from the USA. Helen, what do you say? Let's continue with Tiago, and then we do Januíbe. So we follow.
Yeah,
that's fine.
We can follow this order. Yes.
Okay. Tiago.
So hello, everyone. Can you hear me well? First of all, thanks, Pedro, for the invitation. It's a pleasure to be here with Helen, Phivos, and Januíbe. I will also share my screen my presentation. So the idea is to talk a little bit about this project, this recent project. It's an ongoing project. I hadn't been working with electronic music or electroacoustic music for a few years, but of course the situation of the pandemic somehow brought me back to it. I've studied and worked in the electroacoustic studio for a lot of years, a number of years. But in the past recent years, I was basically back in the instrumental, the instrumental, so to speak, traditional musical environment. So, but that relates a lot to this project, since the universe and the domain of the instrument is something that have always somehow been around for me. So the general context of the piece, when I return to these questions, basically something that interests me a lot is the process of hybridization of the instrument with electronic sound sources. Basically, we have we have one domain of the instrumental domain that has a connection, a very visual connection, and an impact on the instrumental gesture, a kind of musical gesture associated with it, the relationship with the notation and all that, and the possible interferences and the, so to speak, mechanization of this instrumental gesture when we instigate the interactions with the electronic sound environment. So the idea of anamorphosis for me, which is basically a metaphor coming from the visual realm, from curved mirrors, where you kind of you distort a visual image to a point where there's a distortion to a limit of what you see, but it still remains recognizable. So this general, in a kind of a poetic instance, so to speak, it's something that is very present. So in the sound domain, it refers to a general idea of torsion of an object to such an extent that its identity remains recognizable, in contrast to a complete metamorphosis, where the transformation of a sound object into another is apparent. So this duality and these hybrid spaces, so to speak, where the universe of the instrument, especially in this piece, for example, where it's the idiom of the saxophone is very present. So sometimes it's invaded by these universe of the electronic sound sources. So basically this process of hybridization of an instrument being played and electronic interactions, it has these two basic aspects. The first one is the visual aspect. I use the word conflict here because this is something that really interests me, is when you present an electronic sound source with the presence of the instrumental source, you basically you generate different possibilities of not only blending, but exploring these short circuits, so to speak. So visual conflict acting in the instrumental performance, short circuits in the relationship of instrumental action and resulting reaction. And on the other hand, the auditory conflict acting in the instrumental performance. So these short circuits, so to speak, in the relationship of instrumental action and resulting, the sound resulting reaction. So in the specific context of this piece, in code release for tenor sax and electronic sounds, I've explored different stages between the instrumental idiom and interferences brought by electronic sounds, interferences in the performance gestures. So I've tried to create different levels of these interactions. A dimension of human gesture being invaded by artificial interferences. So this is something, especially in view of this telematic, so to speak, experience that some of us have been living for some time now. It's something very present, and try to explore it in the piece. And the electronic realm brings an outside dimension, the possibility of putting together, on the one hand, mixture into a new hybrid, on the other hand, putting together improbable objects that otherwise would not be in the same context. So this is another point that has always interested me a lot, this kind of exotic situations in the middle of the instrumental reality, especially in a piece like this where the idiom of the instrument is very present. So the instrumental materials were written in a defined temporality. So this is something that guided me a lot from the beginning. So the starting point, so to speak, is the instrumental temporality. It's a very defined tempo for the piece, really thought for the saxophone, in the saxophone idiom. And specific points were created in order to provoke these mixtures with the electronic sounds. So an open notation was used in some points of the score, with limited durations predicting the mixtures or interactions with the electronic sounds. Another point is an exchange of auditory information between composer-performer. Since only a few aspects of these places of interaction were known beforehand. So the idea of a back and forth process where the universe of these selected sound objects would somehow, after I had some written part for the saxophone, would influence on the materials of the instrument, and once again it would go back to influencing one another. So the sound object influences the written materials and vice versa. So the written materials change the sound objects, would not be static, so to speak. I have to say that all this process has been done, of course, not live, but the objects were treated in a studio situation. Only a few aspects of these specific places of interaction were known beforehand, like pitch perception and duration. So these two aspects were basically the first point of departure for this interaction. A further process follows of adaptation to improve the mixtures, whether it is to blend or to provoke an intentional break, a short circuit. So here I have an example of the score. So there are specific places which are basically notated with these numbers, where so they're very, in this case, very short moments where I try to bring this study, so to speak, of interaction. So you see, it's a very idiomatic piece for the instrument realm. So the general interest of discovering the sounds to be encoded. This is something that always interested me a lot, which is the relationship between this idiomatic writing, so to speak, for the instrument, and the challenges presented when you face the interaction or the openness, so to speak, to this electronic sound realm. So this for one side, and liberating sonorous possibilities to find through an open notation. From a compositional point of view, an interest on the challenges presented by written notation in the context of complex sound objects that are selected and put to interact and mix with the instrumental materials. Another question, another point that is explored in this project is Ligetti's idea of permeability, where the materials, the written materials especially, are more or less receptive to the integration to external sound objects. So I try to explore, and the process of studying this reveals different conditions where both the instrumental sound universe suffers or goes through a transformation process, so as to be more receptive, more to increase the possibilities of integration to these other sound objects, and vice versa. So the electronic sound objects, these complex sound objects, go through also a process of transformation in order to sometimes to blend, and sometimes to be more, to present their bodies as they are in a situation of a conflict. So the performer faces the challenge to increase the conditions of integration of the written materials in terms of spectral density, for example, with the electronic sounds. This process of hybridization brings out a sound body that composes with the instrument and does not intend to be always foreign to it, creating sound bodies that admit the difference, the improbable. So that's basically the context of the piece. These are 6 modes of interaction planned for the piece. There were tested all of them in order to increase the possibilities of integration. So the first one was pitch content. So as I started from the written materials for saxophone, I had a very well-defined pitch context. So this was, of course, the first parameter that guided these modes of interaction. So the coincidence of fundamental frequency perception. This one was one thing that helped the calibration of the different sound domains. 2, increasing spectral density of longer duration saxophone materials. As I was saying before. 3, percussive attacks mixtures with short duration sound objects. Especially in this moment of the piece, I will show in a few moments. I was exploring very short sound objects. So to create, as I showed in the score, very local points of interaction. 4, statistical dispersion mixtures. Another strategy of combining these materials. And 5, accumulation of energy, instrumental and gesture. So especially in those moments where the notation is more open, there's an energy in the this is left for the performer to try to integrate, to blend with the sound, electronic sound environment. And 6, the mechanization of instrumental gesture. That is something that when we talk about musical gesture, as I said, even when you are very immersed in this instrumental idiomatic way of perceiving and making music, you have a possibility of creating new instances of musical gesture. Let me see how the time is okay.
It's okay, Tiago. You have 1.5 minutes more.
Okay, so it's enough to hear an excerpt of the ongoing project. We've started, me and Pedro, for about a month. So we can hear, let me share with you. Okay.
We can't hear Tiago. Let's start again. Maybe you forgot to share the audio.
Just an excerpt. Thank you.
Tiago. And now, Januíbe Tejera, it's your time.
Good morning for all, good night, maybe Phivos. I don't remember your hours. Good afternoon for you at the moment. No? Thank you all. I think I go to connect in some sense with the President Chu presentation, because I will talk about this connection between instrumental world and electronic world, but also in connection with intermediate projects and not only in music projects. Just to explain a bit, I normally work a lot with compositions instrumental, and my question with electronics was almost how this relation with instrumental world are connected with the electronics. I'll explain a bit more. Actually, I devised electronics in three different approach, and the first one is the most common, is fixed media, no tape music. These models where we are not thinking about outside of the electronics, you are composing inside. Is something quite different from composers. I think each one of us can express the same. Composers many times are working with imagination without feedback of the sound when you are writing. And when you are working with electronics, you have this density of the sound every day, and that's much more near of a player, a performer, in the sense of to have this quantity of amount of sound in your ears each day, and you have to react. That's a quite different process, but is maybe one process quite near also in the sense of you are trying to explore in this relation of reaction, make choice. And that's different of composing without the results, without have the player or something giving us the sound, and where we are not speculative situation, but much more than sensitive. Have to imagine that space where little decisions will be taken after, and that's the great thing. That part of the decision that we are done are not doing in the score, but are doing in dialogue with someone or without you sometimes, where the player are alone. The second one is the mixed music, is what exactly the example of Tiago was perfect, in the sense where we are connecting to words. And normally that's the great, for me, question. We are connecting to words and not really just putting electronic in the sound of the instrument, but you are connecting two persons, or maybe three persons, or four persons. That is, many times you are working also for sound designers, like the case of Phivos also, or a sound engineer, or something else like a RIM. In France, they have this crazy personage of RIM, the realisateur of informatic music, something like quite special, don't have in other words. And that is a mix of persons. We are much more near of like instruments, like, I don't remember the name of Quechua, I think, these flutes of Peru and all these region of the end, where they have flutes with different parts, each one play one note, and you have one instrument constructed by a community. In some sense, mixed music have this feeling for me. You are constructing something together, and incidentally, you are interacting with the musician, you are taking decision for the performer. You're telling for him, here, you have to think about this thing for me, not for you, but for me. Because I need this impulse to have this active action in my electronic part. And this relation is enriched, sure, because you're in dialogue, but in the other way is creating a little contrast that is not small, that's I don't like too much the word performer, to be honest. I think interpreter is more easy. Performer is like someone going to play the interpret, someone thinking about. And just interpreters have a lot of time of their own life trying to find little solutions about gestures and sound, and have developed a lot of thinking about that, of feeling about that. And incidentally, you are asking them to, okay, I'm take part of your motions, part of your brain, and I'm deciding, because I need that, I need this impulse, I'm constructing from you. And this relation is quite strange for me, in the sense because we are delimited space for this person. And that's the great problem of, in some sense, actually, for mixed music, out of this enriched world where we connecting people and create another system they are also no doubt about is a great power. And the third one is, for me, where I'm trying to think about today is the question of instrumental electronic instruments. Inside of electronic instruments, we have histories like lutherie is inside now. They have this theremin and Martineau and all this crazy instrument that we're creating. And we're still creating new ones. And all these new instruments have a conflict because, again, you are faced to something quite strange. And I think Pedro can attest these things. Musician, the instrumentalist is like start with 5 years old, okay, sometimes with 15, but play 20 years to start to be a professional. And 20 years with little movements and little control. And students take that and okay, go out that, and this new instrument is like move this one. And it's the same for ask for a saxophonist to start to play percussion. And sure, he can learn, he's a musician, he have a brain of musicians, but the micro controls and this like of finesse in some sense of understanding the sounds by gestures, he lost. And electronic instruments, in this sense, are still we face to this problem, and we are starting, I think, to reimagine that with hybrid instruments. You know, in these models, we're thinking about electronics inside of traditional instruments. But I think someone, in some sense, better than us, have a solution. Is I think in classical music or concert music, and we have a lot of material, have conditions in some sense normally to work in house and people, etc. But pop music, on the other side, don't have that. The pop music, sure, large venues in pop music is a thing, but small one have to find early solution for electronics quite easy. And they just start to put for the musician all the stuff. They say, okay, you have the electronics for yourself, and you make the decisions. And many times, sure, the composer perform, that's the difference. But they start to thinking, okay, you can have your systems, and you have to create your sound. And no one more thinking about in pop music like electronics, more electronic. No one to think, oh, guitar electrics and effects. It's just guitar electric, and that is. No one thinking a synthesizer is effects. It's just a clavier. And the instrument is this, in this sense. Okay? I'm trying to connect this relation between how instrumentalists and performer using these instruments and how you can put that for us more and more. Okay, just to explain a bit where I start and where I come from this idea. In the beginning of these questions, I'm working with a trio. It's 2015, and so working in the trio for flute, piano, and guitar electric. And finally, we decide to amplify the instrument. Just that, nothing else. Don't have electronic parts in sense of standard, how we imagine. But by this means of put some amplification, we could ask for the musician think his whole instrument by another way. That is, he start to thinking small sound or smaller sounds like big. And you can just adapt and recreate in some sense the balance between the instruments, but in the same time offering 100% of the control for the musician. I'm not just doing nothing. I just put the microphone, calibrate microphones, and done. And now the instrument have the time to construct his sound. And more than that, I could dialogue with him between the time we are starting and tell, okay, that's the microphones, and go on. And I don't have to ask him more, nothing. I just want to share videos, share screens for the audio also, yes.
Yes, if you share a Chrome tab, you have to share the audio. If you share a video, it's directly from your computer, but it won't have so much quality on the streaming.
Okay, let me see by this way. This is a function. Okay. Perfect. You can see it's okay. Just from there, I go to just take a moment. Oh.
I think you forgot to share the audio, Januíbe. You have to go out, take it out from the. I can remove it. Try again and share the audio before going inside the. Have you done that or?
Yes. Share screen.
On the box on the left, on the bottom, you're gonna see share audio. But you have to use a Chrome tab. It has to be on the internet. Or a video from your computer.
Let me see by another way that I can do that by this one.
Do you have it online on YouTube or
yeah,
SoundCloud?
Exactly. I have something SoundCloud. That's I'm trying to find.
Okay.
Okay. Okay. I think now it's good. Okay. I think now you are okay. To there. I think this example is quite clear about the question of amplification. No, the instruments don't see something extra. They have this feeling, okay, it's just the flute, but in other way, for the musicians, the instrument is quite big, and he could work within the level of the electronic guitar and the piano using wind sounds and little pizzicati, this kind of things. And you have the feeling of someone exhausted in some sense by the quantity of air they are doing, but it's the amplification working that. It's much more than something. Okay? And little by little, I move from this question. After this work, I have two projects that involve the question of electronics in different ways. One was in Navis. It's a project where all the musicians are amplified and have 10 musicians around the public, and it's a 1 hour concert with each musician is working with that, and the voice are starting to use whisper voice in this show. The show, I don't have a visual record because it's in the dark. And many times of the musicians are playing without light or with really small light, and the idea is just be there in some sense of this listening inside. And from there, I also work with Moissange. And Moissange, in some sense, I jump in this question more strongly because I need to think about amplification as part of the show. To explain, Moissange is a chamber opera where the history is someone that's working in showbiz. And from this situation, I try to imagine musicians amplified, the electronic inside, and all this different stuff in some sense for the electronic. And just take a look in Moissange if you understand what I mean about that. Okay, perfect. You are there. I go to share again.
It's not appearing to me. Have you
Just
shared?
I'm going to share now. Okay.
All right.
We stop there. Just to understand, in Moissange, I have this situation of the performers are all amplified again, and in special, the voice we decide to work with this kind of, again, simple things, reverb, etc. Have a large electronic session, but not in this section. We have a lot of electronic in this 1 hour of music again, and have a lot of electronic inside, but we try to find some kind of mix, or also the instrument parts and the singers have this feeling of all is amplified, how is with electronics. It's like this little note that you have in this pedal note is the guitar doing, it's not the electronic in this size, because in the beginning it was electronic, and once the guitar start to play this pedal note, you can find, okay, that's better, that can be more controlled, more designed, and you get out the electronic, and it, okay, its pedal note will be done by the instrument again. And again, the history is how control electronic parts by an instrument can offer, in some sense, a gesture. Okay, and from there, I jump in the last examples that I'm doing. Is the last show before COVID, and now the situation there were all in the moment. And I work in a large project that's Tablado, again, 1 hour with electronic and ensemble. And in Tablado is also connected maybe with Phivos in the sense of there are more also visual questions. I just need to jump inside because now I know this another way to share, but just to explain in Tablado, my question was inverse that. That is, I start to thinking about if I come back to electronics, thinking how can I manipulate that using much more improvising systems. And I start to create little systems of improvisations, and where I try to just think, okay, that's my means to create electronics, and not a means of writing everything, but much more improvising during the process, and from there try to play with my electronics. Okay, and Tablado have two shorter video. Let me see if they function with sound this time. Okay, and I would like to show. Okay. Wow, this way. Okay, tell me if you can hear from there.
No.
No, okay. Let's go back to the...
And we have just 1 more minute, Januíbe.
Okay, no problem. Let's go there, and it's good now.
Don't forget to share the audio.
I think this time is good. Yes? Oh God. I don't think this time is good.
Did you share with the Chrome tab?
Yeah,
share Chrome tab, not the entire window.
I share with Chrome tab this one.
Let's try once again.
Yeah, it's now it's okay. Okay, just to conclude, sure, I think this instrumental idea of coming to electronics with improvisation is a quite utopic, in the sense of I don't think the listener will to understand that. It's not my project. It's much more how techniques from instrumental projects can come from electronics. Sure, we can work with data systems like Bach and other systems, but maybe have another space to use and more about how creating system of improvisation and play with that for me. And I'm working these two ways balance and thinking about more about how instrumental relation can be created in the electronics and how I can give for the performer the decision in electronics in some sense. That's the main story inside. Thank you.
Okay, thank you, Januíbe. I would like to thank you all, guest composers, say hi to everybody that is watching us. Thank Pedro for this invitation to moderate this session with so fantastic colleagues, composers, awarded composers. And of course, three of you have a personal approach to composition, but when you were presenting your lectures, we could see that there are some similarities between you. The first one, and it's an aspect that I would like to point for us to start this discussion, and parenthesis, if you that are watching us have some comment, question, an issue about it, please feel free to send it to us, to our YouTube chat, and we are put it on screen and comment the comments and answer the questions as well. So, Phivos and Tiago, you had an approach that called my attention, because you are dealing with images. So Phivos are really dealing with the images, with virtual reality. And Tiago, when he thinks, or when he thought about this piece that he showed unaccepted to us, but when he think about composition, he's thinking about anamorphosis, so these distorted images. So it's interesting because you are making music. So Phivos is making the interaction a more musical thing. The VR making a musical connection, and at the same time, Tiago is making a visual approach to music when he is thinking about mixed music, when he's thinking about interaction. At the same time, Phivos has a very interesting approach to composition. He's working with soundtracks and VR, and Tiago and Januíbe are thinking about, let's say like this, traditional composer, even when we are talking about electroacoustic music or mixed music. And a question that intrigues me as a performer, I think Pedro, it's a concern to Pedro as well, it's the issue of the inflexibility and the issue of the freedom of the interpreter, of the player, of the performer. You can use the word you prefer, I don't care. But here is the thing. I would like to know from Januíbe and Tiago, how do you deal with this question? Because we know that the electroacoustic support brings deep issues when we are talking about performance. And how do you deal with this kind of inflexibility to the performer? And at the same time, Phivos, I would like to know about you. How do you deal with it? Because you, as a composer, when you are thinking about virtual reality or game music, your métier nowadays, you are not free to do everything you want as a composer. You have to follow a given structure. So I would like to know about you. How you deal with it as a composer, and how you, Tiago and Januíbe, deal with it as a composer, thinking about the interaction during the performance.
Who's starting?
Okay. Who starts? Oh, okay.
Phivos, if you want to go on.
Yeah.
Okay, yes. Actually, in my case, I think there are two questions about the flexibility of the performance. I think my music is all about flexibility of the performance. It's like, and also my research was about this idea of self-organizing music. So music that adapts in every place, and which is similar to the question, let's say, of improvisation, but there is intentionality, and there are many different levels to treat that. I mean, it's the technological point of view, which is deals with algorithms that can do that. There is the composer part, which is like how, as a composer, you can have intentionality into the result, and I put there also the performer, which is also the performer, how interacts with the piece and how much it's intended the result. And then there is the listener, which is also, there is this, let's say, flexibility of interpretation. Then about the freedom of, do you mean in the sense of having, if I understood correctly, do you mean in the sense of having like teamwork, that there are other members that they are working and there is a director, in this sense, you mean?
Yeah.
Well, this is I think it's the same case. Of course, we tend to value the authorship. Also in cinema, the same thing. You know, the director or the composer is like the sole creator. But I think it's the same question in every field. Like how much there are other aspects than you that are influence the result. And to me, it's very important that I mean, I want to be influenced by the other creators. I like the idea of being part of the team, and I for me it's very important also the audience. It's like because there is no music without the audience, and I'm not talking about, you know, radio, but you know, there are ears that they are listening, and they will, at the end, they will do the music in their heads. So yeah, it's the same. It's actually twofold, the question. Yeah.
Yeah.
I don't know if I answered your question.
Yes, because okay, we can discuss, not here, not now, but we can discuss how, in which level a composer is free to do everything he wants. It's not the case now, but your approach is different from the beginning, because you are inside the team and you have to follow instructions, and your relationship to the composition is different from a composer that is in this environment.
Yes and no. I would say I don't follow instructions because I don't like this kind of projects. You know, that it's like a top-down relationship. I will come with ideas. I will suggest things. I will come with concepts, and of course in the media world, sometimes this is not the best approach. But I like projects, and my collaborators that we work together were open to work, and the result is out of a conversation instead of following instructions. But I think it's the same thing in every level. It's like even the traditional sense of the composer that it's free to do anything. It's like there is a status that presupposes some kind of conversation with how to say, virtual curator that we forget many times. So there is always this, and if we forget it, it's I think it's, yeah, we cannot forget it then.
Yeah, very nice. And you, Tiago, how do you deal with this question when you are working, when you are composing? Because you told us, in fact, that you are not working now with real-time interaction. Am I right?
Yeah.
Yeah. So how if you, it's for me, it's hard for a composer not to think about it. So how do you see this issue? How do you deal with it in your work?
Yeah, well, I've noted a couple of questions in when you were starting to speak. Of course, this problem of the interaction and the flexibility for the performer is something that was very different for this particular project. In this piece for saxophone and it was a kind of an out of time interaction. So the flexibility was gained by a back and forth process of changing the sound bodies and the sound universes. So that's one thing. But it was a very specific point during this situation in the pandemics. I don't know how you are, Phivos in Berlin and Athens and Januíbe in the States. I don't know how is the situation there, but here in Brazil, we've been in a situation where we're probably going to stay in this the situation for another year at least. So I would like to connect this question with something that I'm predicting for the outcome of this situation, that I think it will, even if the composer didn't think of these aspects, the visual aspect, or as you said, a traditional composition approach to the work, I think that we've been forced to thinking about this, the visual aspect of the, it's a relationship with the video now. All the projects we've been doing somehow are absorbing this quality, this video aspect. So it's a different media for us, composers who were not accustomed to dealing with this new media. So forcibly it will somehow, I hope it will stay. I think it will do some good for us. But I don't know if I'm trying to go around your question, but I think the flexibility of the performance is I think I found specifically difficult in this project, especially considering this new interactive environment that we're in. So if we were in a different situation, I value it. Of course, it's. I think me and Pedro, we talked very shortly about this in a performance situation, how it's going to happen. But of course, it will be completely different, and we'll have to discuss ways of studying this and making it happen in such a way that it doesn't put him in how can I say, in a restraint, so he can have the flexibility necessary for the musical discourse, or however you want to say.
If I may say, different gestures for different moments, for different contexts, pandemics or stage or studio situations.
Yeah. So we haven't really gone through that situation, that performance situation, but these are some questions that I'm asking myself, and maybe we're gonna have to do it with it. And it's the presence of this new media. Maybe, as I said, maybe we will do us some good. I think this specific instrumental music, as we've been doing it, I think it will do some good to bring these new interactive media, these new ways of transforming musical gestures, and talking about musical gestures in a very general way, that the way we comprehend music, what is music for us. I think I don't know if I answered, but
yes. The issue is that in the pandemics we are forced to think outside of the box, and this kind of concerns that you and Pedro have now working on this piece is very similar to the concerns and issues that we have when we are trying to make, for instance, chamber music, traditional chamber music, acoustic chamber music. How can we do it when everyone is not together? So everybody is trying to solve these questions and trying to make something with all of it. And I am realistic. I am not optimistic normally, but I think that we are open some gates to the future. We are rethinking some patterns and some ways of making music, and it's nice. It's good, and it's nice to know that you are thinking. You are working in collaboration, but now in a different environment, even more different, if it is possible now with the pandemics. And Januíbe, you can talk a little more about this question. You started talking about the question of the inflexibility. You said something about on the realm of the interaction, about the composer taking out some interprets or player or performer decisions. But when I was listening to your music, and I could hear that you try to, in a certain way, with the electroacoustic sounds, you try to extend the sound experience and to extend in a certain way the possibilities, the instrumental possibilities. For instance, when you are working with that amplified flute. So it would be nice to know how you deal with this issue that is so important. It is on the surface and is, I think, the main issue when we are talking about interaction. That is this relation with the performer.
Just to be clear, only the last example have electronics that I show. The other example don't have electronics. That's the point exactly. They are musicians controlling something that sounds like electronics, and that is the ideal. Is like how given to the performer the control of that, and not more. After is a deal. I think the Phivos talk something that's the great question is sometimes you want to work with team, and that's different. And you are working with team, you are enrich yourself in your projects, that you are increasing things, and that is another way. But coming back to the question of flexibility in special, flexibility seems maybe open box for me in the sense of it's about time questions, timbre questions, performer questions. It can be a lot of things, no? Because flexibility can be little decisions, really little. For example, how the sforzando needs to be for the sound of the electronic start, for example. That is a decision, a little one, but can be time decision, and that's a more complex one, because you are putting, I don't know, click track and these kind of things. And I think each works needs some solutions, and normally, again, in the echo of Phivos, sometimes they are decided by the productions, and the composer wants to do that, but you have 2 months to start, and you have to find a solution, and that's a production decision. And from this, they have to take, I don't know, click track. That also they now this. This pulse, big pulsing, and that's something quite easy to work also without sounds. After I work sometimes with sensors, and each one I try to find different solutions for them. What I can explain a bit more clear, now here in EMS, the center I'm director, we are starting a new ensemble, only connected with amplified instruments again, and putting a 6-drawer, PRO 6-drawer, where each with electric guitar, and with each one have his own amplification, his own pedals, etc. And composer don't have more to create electronics in the sense of outside of the musician relation, but they have to come and work with the musician one by one with the systems and tell, okay, my idea is that I want a sound by this color, and the performer have to create his sound. And this is another relation inside of electronics. They're starting to think, and I think hybrid instruments now also open the question. Special piano hybrid, I think is maybe the best one for the moment. This sounds really easy to do at home in some sense, and easy to hear in the quality of the sound. And I think this is the questions of flexibility is in the 2 answer of Tiago and Phivos. One is when you work with teams, you are sharing decision. And sometimes you don't want that in the sense, and that's not working with team. But if you are working with a team and you are working 2 performer and composer in a duo, you are sharing decisions. You don't have. After you need to understand that performer work a lot to micro decisions. And lost that is lost power. It's just for the music is lost power, not for the performer or for the composer. It's lost power in the sense of an easy way to hear that. If you think about 80, 90 repertoire for electronics, where we start to have this lot of virtual instruments, starting simulation of piano, simulation of it, and have this flux of notes without phrase connections. A lot of notes. Why? Because computers don't make these decisions. And musicians make this decision by seconds about how start a phrase, how finish one, how connecting with the. And computers give data. Data is like more notes, more. Sure, that's crazy. You can work with 100 piano in the same place. Wow, that's amazing. But for little decisions, you are lost in something. And that's the balance. What you need and what you control that, and what you don't control, like composer, and recognize that's part of the job of the performer. And that's the great thing. Okay, don't lose that. Make that in your, make a means to give that for the performer.
Nice. And also, Januíbe, this kind of hybrid instruments, like Yamaha, this clavier, that I am particularly interested on knowing and working with it. It enables the player the players, to work beyond the virtuosity, for instance, because for a pianist, for instance, when we are working on a hybrid piano, we can share with the electronic device a part of the performance. So the approaches I can see when I could see when you were explaining and answering my questions, that something is changing through the composers and to the performers as well, and it's very interesting. And I think it is. We are very lucky to be in this environment, in talking about interaction, searching for solutions to these questions, and at the same time we can follow these changes, this changing of views little by little. And I am very glad to hear you and to hear about it. And I would like to before we finish the session, I would like to thank you. And if each one of you could say something for this before we finish the session. So Phivos, you were the first one, and now you are the first to say your final words and to say a goodbye here.
Actually, made me think a lot of things now that we opened this idea of flexibility, which touches the idea of interpretation and control. Actually, it's different aspects to see the same thing. And what Januíbe was saying now about the example of the VST that was sounding really bad in the past. I mean, this is the idea of, I mean, sooner or later, someone has to take these decisions. The same thing is with acoustics. I mean, if you have very bad acoustics, or you have to create some virtual space with the electronics. If you don't take this decision, no one will take it, and it will be random and unintentional and bad. So yeah, I think it's so. I mean, in my case, I do that a lot with algorithms, or I do it sometimes with simulation. Of course, I'm working with musicians also sometimes, but it's not the case, especially this period. And the other thing, it was Tiago that talked about the video. It's also in my case, it has become the last month's central aspect, and I'm very much experimenting with this. I mean, apart from working all these projects, I mean, directly working with video and trying to edit stuff, and I found that it's very powerful. I don't want to develop more on that, but I think it is something that becomes part of our environment, because if you think about it now, we are 5 people in front of a 2D screen, and we talk to the air, and it's video that connects us. So we have to deal with these new environments in some way. That's it. And thank you for everything. I mean, thank you for the whole talk and presentation.
Thank you, Phivos. Tiago.
Was a lot of interesting aspects of this. But I was thinking a lot of times during the conversation about this aspect of this new media that we're going to be dealing with for, especially here in Brazil, for like 2 years, something like that. It's going to be 2 years without a rehearsal, a musical rehearsal, without the presence, without the physical presence. So something is changing deeply for me, it's this is very present. And but I was saying, and we were talking about, I think this this visual aspect of the performance, I think it will somehow be explored. I think many of us are already exploring the interaction with video, and this touches the question of collaboration. I think although this piece I presented, it's a very like Helen said, and then it's a piece for saxophone and electronic sounds, so it doesn't really involve, at least not yet, this other media or an intermedia situation. I think the collaboration is something that it's a kind of a result of all this research that it's been happening, that affects musical performance in general, I think, and will certainly leave us with a lot of questions at this moment, but also a lot of research, interesting research, and it will be an aspect that I think composers and artists, this aspect of collaboration, I think it's as I said before, I think it will do good to composers and musicians in general, and visual artists, and all that things that involve this environment. So thank you for the excellent discussion, and Pedro for the invitation, and very interested in the works of Phivos, and also Januíbe, and it was a pleasure.
Thank you, Tiago and Januíbe.
Before, just talk, thank you, Phivos and Tiago, for the presentation of both. Phivos, nice to see you again from internet, unfortunately not with a beer, but next, I hope soon. And thank you also, Pedro and Helen, both for the interaction and for all the festival, Pedro. Bravo. And the 6th one, great. That's really great. And just to tell, I think for me, don't have too much separation, more and more electronics or not. I'm thinking like instrumental world in the same. And I work a lot with video yet, and project with theater, much more than performance with great venues and theater company. And curiously, when the pandemic arrived, and I just in 2 years of project without anything of video, and without only commission for music, and without any performance. And that's quite strange to have this counterbalance, because I have the feeling that in universe way I'm just composing for musicians, and they are recording their own way. But I think have something open, and my great feeling about technology, the question is ecology and technology. We have to talk about it. We have to recognize they have a problem there, and that's a big problem, and that's not a smaller one, and you have to find solutions. And you start like musicians, because I think each one of us have maybe this feeling in his own way with plastic at home, it's kind of things. But studentally, when we are working, we are thinking about more and more things, more and more gadgets. And that's crazy. That has something there that we need to find the solutions in your brain. It's just a point, an open door about this.
Thank you, Januíbe. I'm very glad to be here with you. And I would like to thank Pedro for this invitation, and congratulations for the 6th edition of this conference. A great event that I am very happy to take part.
Of course, thank you all. Without you, wouldn't be possible. Really great discussion. I think it's very important, all the subjects treated here. I would like to make very brief observations about you all. It was very interesting, complementary, and I chose for this edition to discuss on relations between images and sound, music, and images, virtual reality. Tomorrow we have a closing concert also discussing this stuff. This afternoon we're gonna have a session dedicated to art installation, sound installations, and these hybrid connections that have been built since a long time ago already with music. And I think it's very interesting when Phivos says, for example, when he says he was talking about immersion, interactivity, telepresence. And when he talks about interactivity, he says any interaction can be musical. So he's working on this, how to become musical, an interaction in a game or in a virtual reality. And with this, he's going to involve his public, and has the telepresence, and the immersion will be possible with musical elements that are not new, that we have been exploring, spatialization, all this. It's part of electroacoustic work since a long time ago. And something I was astonished to see that the prizes that you were showing, they just look like kind of like cinema prizes, you know. So now I think during the pandemics, we are all watching streaming out the whole day and lives, and we watch cinema at home now, and we're trying to make it more immersive. We're trying to make it more like cinema, you know. And the virtual reality is developing very fast. We know that each year we have more games. It's a market that is growing up, and music has something very important to do there. And so that's one point about Phivos. About Tiago, very interesting also. Not because I'm involved in the project, come on, it's not this point. It's a beginning of collaboration. Tiago finished his PhD not a long time ago, 2 months ago, something like this. 1 month. Wow. Okay, only 1 month. And we started doing this piece. It's not over. We're developing it, and he has it's very. What I would like to say about this. When a composer comes with a project to an instrumentalist or to a performer, he was devising very, very clear to him the parameters he was working with: pitch, spectral, density, percussion, attacks, statistical stuff, accumulation of energy, and mechanization of gestures. But when I take the score and I listen to the electronics that I was working together since the beginning, we work with all this together, and we get to the gesture that Januíbe was talking about. Between Januíbe's thinking in a very instrumental way makes me thinking about Max Matthews also, who was the creator of electronic music. He worked on the first programs, and he was a violin player. And there's an interview by Max Matthews that he says that what he wanted since the beginning was to build instruments with electronics. So in his conception, even if it was a very open system programming that you can really manage the very smallest parts of the electronics interaction, production of sounds, and by his time on the 50s was very limited. It was an open conception of instrumental thinking. So that's interesting. When Helen says about playing the disc clavier and new possibilities with it's a mechanic piano that you can program it, that you can interact in many ways. It's very open to programmation also. There is a new way of thinking on instruments or instrumentation or composition with algorithms and with interaction on virtual reality. Everything is mixed up, and you have a new a new field of development of interactions that is an enhanced instrumental skill or electronic skill, and they're together, they're mixed it up, and they're developing together. It will depend on how the performers, I mean, the composers on the electronics and the instrumentalists on the instruments, how they're going to build their configurations. What else? That's it. Very interesting also when Januíbe talks about improvisational stuff. There was a piece that he was putting. I thought there was electronics, but it's not. Was not. I think the flute with the chiki 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 chiki. You have a perceptive. You perceive a large spectrum, and then the other sounds that come is like a filter freezed on time. I had this sensation when I was listening to it. Very interesting also. Interaction, the real interaction between sounds there, and it doesn't matter that you're not using electronics, but you have an enlarged approach of using sounds and interacting with them. So that's the main point. Each of you showed a very interesting approach in these interactions. I think Helen also gave a very interesting synthesis of how you worked with it, and really delighted, really happy with this roundtable. Thank you all again. Many thanks. Wish you a great continuation on your work and everything you are doing. So, Helen, if you want to give the last words of the session. Thank you all very much.
Pedro, you have said already everything, so I would like to thank you. Thank you, Phivos. Thank you, Tiago. Thank you, Januíbe, for sharing your thoughts, your music, and for pointing us what we can expect of the future in interaction field. And thank you, Pedro, for this invitation. And that's it. Take care, you all. Thank you that are watching us, and see you.
Bye-bye. Ciao, ciao.